So I briefly want to go over what exactly is my outstanding concerns and questions for PoE 2, since the thing is in 15 minutes. I typed these yesterday. Okay. This is just being recorded for the video that'll put out tonight, and hopefully all of these will be answered, and I'll have no more questions, comments, or concerns, right? Because this is the big PoE 2 reveal trailer that's supposed to answer all of our concerns and make me feel all warm and fuzzy. Let's see if it does. My concerns are broken up into 3 brackets: combat-related, endgame / post-campaign, and then unknown memes. The first portion of combat-related is the dodge bar function. This is kind of coupled with the WASDA and the other ones, which is the game is designed combat-wise around these things, which means if you're not using these things, you're going to be at a disadvantage and probably die a bunch, especially the dodge bar, right? Because the bosses are made in mind with no longer run and gun, which is what they talked about when adapting WASD to all their forms. It's supposed to be you're dodging telegraphed attacks, and if you're not using the dodge bar to do so, the tracking's going to be so good on the enemies that it's going to probably be killing you. That's what they showcased in the first thing. So my concern is just how much of this is going to feel prevalent for the movement while doing combat, since that's the entire game was redesigned around WASDA now after they said they liked it so much. How is that going to feel? Nothing they show us is going to answer these questions. The only way they can answer the question is playing the fucking game, which we can't do until December 6th, so that's kind of just there. The next 2 I would put, and these 3 in the same bracket, which is combo points, weapon swapping, and then the intended, intended multiple skill usage, which is, these are the 3 parts of combat that are new to PoE 2 from PoE 1 that I'm not familiar with, being there's a combo point system, and using those, loosest thing I could think of, like being ultimates, I guess, from Valve skills, and the weapon swapping being a second subset of skills you could use in combat, and the amount of intended skill usage from showcases is roughly 3 to 4 different skills per pack to clear them. Again, keep in mind, PoE has absolutely terrible demos in their videos for how the game actually operates. Going into this, are any of these actually going to be prevalent in whatever the end game is? Who knows? But these are my concerns. If these stay prevalent throughout the entire course of the game, that's going to be very annoying, I would say. And the last one is just a definitive answer to the question that they've said, which is support gems are capped at 1 linked per character, meaning if I have multiple gems linked in my character, I can only be using 1 GMP at a time. If I'm playing a build that uses multiple skills, maybe I'd like more than 1 GMP linked at a time, but I can't. It's only 1 per character, so how is it going to feel? Is it going to feel anything more than just the secondary supports on secondary and third setups are just going to feel like worse versions of GMP, i.e. I want to have more projectiles on a secondary setup, but now I'm forced to use an LOP or volley equivalent, which is worse than GMP, so it's just going to feel shitty as a byproduct. Is there going to be more support to compensate for this? No idea. So that's a concern. So those are like the most combat-related ones for me. And you have the endgame / post-campaign ones. Leveling the campaign doesn't matter. If you broke up Path of Exile into 100%, 0.1% would be my campaign experience. I'm spending 99.9% of my time out of the campaign, right? Therefore, none of that fucking matters. So all that matters is whatever mapping is. They haven't used the word mapping, so it's probably not going to be maps, but whatever mapping is, haven't seen anything. Whatever bossing is, haven't seen anything. Endgame loop for customizations, so similar to the Atlas or something like that. Haven't seen anything. And then non-direct content, i.e. side content, Delve High Sanctum, things like that. Haven't seen anything. So need to see what this stuff is, because if PoE has no endgame, there is no game. So without seeing that, yeah. I mean, the campaign will be fun for the first 2 or 3 times you clear it, and then after that, it's just how fast can I get through the campaign so I can start playing the game. Cool. All right. And then the unknown meme section, I just have flask charges are a big concern. I know we're down to 2 flasks from 5. They said a lot of weird shit that was like going back in time, like Jim Crow tech for fucking PoE, which is your flasks don't gain charges. You have to go back to town and click on a well and talk to the NPC to get your flasks back. If there's any amount of breakage in my mapping or endgame experience where I have to stop what I'm doing, go back to town and talk to an NPC, that's fucking throwing, and that's terrible. Hopefully that's not the case. Breaking up, having a fluid endgame is like so important. If that is interjecting that, that's terrible. Mounts they mentioned for one class. Again, I don't know why they would introduce mounts for one class, not introduce mounts for all class monetarily. It seems like something they're going to capitalize on, so I'm curious if that's the case. And then gold is another thing where we had gold introduced in Settlers. Cool concept. I would say overall very poor execution. Became such a through point for all your stoppages, and you had to like, I want to go buy 200 Ancient Orbs. Let me just spend 4 hours farming gold so I can buy them now. That sounds shit for trade. I'm curious what the implementation of gold is going to be in the game. And character selection, creation, I'm just curious about what you mentioned in chat. I think Fatch mentioned it, but it's just the concept of, in this day and age in gaming, it seemed so prevalent for people to pick like their character, whether gender identity, whatever, and to pick like a certain body type. And it did seem kind of strange for what it would be now a AAA title, essentially releasing a $100 million plus company, GG, right? They're releasing a game, and not have any sort of character creation option for picking body type 1, body type 2, or whatever. If you give a shit, I don't give a shit. It just seemed odd that that wouldn't be a thing that they add. So if I want to play a Marauder type character, I could pick a male or female or whatever. Would be surprised to see it. These are all the things. This is like the meme section, but that's kind of something I'd be interesting to see. So that's it. Those are all my outstanding comments and concerns about PoE 2, basically. And they're supposed to be answering all these questions today during the stream. I've had answers to none of these questions definitively. Granted, none of the combat ones, sans the gem thing, could be answered because anything they say doesn't matter, and all that matters is how it feels. So we will see, I guess, on the 6th, but overall, yeah, we'll find out. This is, if you're watching this video on YouTube right now, this is going to be basically hooked up to after I did the video in the beginning saying, these are the things I'd like answered. So we'll go through that first, and then... So, the dodge bar thing, no real mention of at all. That's whatever. Again, it's irrelevant. Anything in this combat system is irrelevant because it's all field-based. But the WASDA movement thing was mentioned at the end, and they said, Octavian's using it. I respect Octavian enough as a player. He's a competent player. He says point and clicks feels fine. Point and click feels fine. I'm not going to bother. There's no point to fight on that, right? It's like, if someone who's not shit at the game says it feels fine, and they stopped using WASD to go into point and click, clearly it's fine, so that's not a concern. The dodge bar thing definitely is a key function because specific uniques are interacting with it. So that one's still a key concern for me. Combo points and weapon swapping, and then the intended multiple skill usage. These were talked about, but these are still red flags for me. Again, it's a feel thing. I have no idea, but clearly they're quite prevalent and used, so if you're not using them, you're probably going to be at a disadvantage. Capping the supports at 1. He said it doesn't, I mean, Jonathan and Mark were saying it's not a big deal and it's going to feel fine and it doesn't make whatever. It didn't make lore sense, but they still did it. Sure. Okay. Endgame content. We saw mapping. It basically seemed the same functionally, which is a bit of a red flag in a way I'll get to later, but that's fine. Bossing. They had bosses. Atlas. There was lots of Atlas side content. There was lots of side content. So the early access has an endgame. No concern there. Unknown memes. Flask charges. Flask charges still didn't exist, but flasks also don't exist. They've been effectively renamed to something else, and that's fine, so whatever. Mounts. Zero mention of mounts at all. Really surprised. Gold is the biggest red flag for me because they showcased a part during the live stream that I thought was really baffling, where it had like, I mean, this to me was really confusing in general, but they had like a dude, right, that was like standing here. Okay, there's your character, all right, and let's just say like this is, there's gold like right here, all right. This character was fucking maybe, I don't know what this is, like five feet from it, and weren't picking up the gold. Like really, really close by, gold isn't auto picking it up. We saw gold auto picking up. That close by, not auto picking up, means it's probably as bad as Settlers, which felt fucking terrible, because 95% of the loot that's being shown when filtered out is gold, and I'm just running around picking up gold. That felt shit. So that looks like it's going to feel equally as shit. That's a concern for me. Character creation. There's no customized character creation. It's just, you're playing a marauder, you're a dude, you're playing a ranger lady, you're a chick. No character creation menu at all. Okay, so moving on to the specific points and notes I had in all of this. I broke it into two different categories, effectively, negative thoughts and positive thoughts. They're kind of interchangeable at times, and they're like really loose. Again, most of these will probably be answered on the 6th, so I'm just shitting out my mouth here, but here they are anyway. The negative thoughts section, and this has really been hammered home massively, and this is, I combined both these points here because I think they're really, the overarching point of contention is keeping the naming scheme for totally different things, I think is a beyond poor choice when it's a different thing being used for a different name in either game that's not interchangeable. Like, you're calling this thing a shrine, but it's not a shrine. This is a strongbox, but it's not a strongbox. Different gems are doing interchangeably different things in both games, but neither of them are the same. There's supposed to be an identity between the games, and why wouldn't they just make up new names for new things? Like, it's Ultimatum, but not. It's whatever, but not. But then you try to look up as a new player, I'm playing both games, and I want to look up a thing about shrines. Well, one's called a shrine, one's not in both games, functionally identical, but called different things, and you have an ability like Caustic Air that does something totally different in each games. The supports are different things. I just don't know why they're biting each other's naming schemes so aggressively, which again leads me to the whole thing about splitting the Reddit and like enforcing that, because it's just gonna, again, you could check Reddit right now, even on launch day. Of the 25 posts on the front page, 19 of them are PoE2 related. This isn't the PoE2 Reddit, this is a PoE1 Reddit. There is a dedicated and officiated PoE2 Reddit, never used, never enforced. If that doesn't get resolved coming into the actual launch, it's going to be a shit show to like try to navigate both things. I think in general, that sort of thing is basically causing a forced withering or drowning out of community content. And it's like saying, you know, we're going to have this one Reddit, we're supporting both games, except we're actually splitting the community, and by not enforcing it and having just the totally one game getting all the sponsored posts and the content, the other one not getting any, you're just slowly, allowing it to basically drown out, which just feels like, why even have both two games, and if you're not going to have their own, like, give them both the appropriate attention. But yeah, so either way, now to the more specific points I was noticing. The shield stun meter. When holding up your shield, you have a stun meter that's growing. The stun meter was located in the bottom left above your health orb. If there's no way to see that above your character and know when your stun meter's building so you could plan around it and not get stun locked out and then just die, it's fucking terrible. Like, you need to have some meter or bar above your head, because I'm not going to be looking at the screen, then watching bottom left for stun meter, top left for buffs, top right for debuffs. It's that level of clutter. It's like using LE overload and having it show up on the bottom right above the skill triggering it. You're never able to monitor that bar, and it has no point. So that's really strange. Charms are just flasks with extra steps. This was an addition in the negative category. But looking back at it now, I think it might be the idea is a positive, right? So having the charms be actable and just passively occurring makes more feel like a way for them to keep flasks but reduce pianoing and macroing, and just have it so they're flasks that are passively occurring, which is why we have a life and a mana flask. No utilities. Charms are the utilities, but you don't push them, they just happen. So it's ultimately the same thing for those who are automating flasks anyway. It just forces you to not have to feel like you're losing out by not pianoing flasks, which I think is ultimately a good thing. They showcased reskilling having no downside and being fluid. Seems like a good thing. I think it's actually a bad thing, because what that means is anytime you're before a boss encounter, you would reskill and resupport, like swapping a support gem, like taking out a GMP, putting in a slower proj for every single boss fight. And if that's allowed and encouraged, it'll kind of feel mandatory, which I think is really bad, because it's adding a level of clunk to the mapping portion or the bossing portion. If it's a dedicated boss thing, I'm killing 10 bosses in a row, it's not a big deal. But if I'm running a map and I'm at the boss and let me stop, open up my window, swap gems, that's always felt shitty in PoE. And if that's going to be free and encouraged in PoE2, that's going to feel equally shitty and mandatory. And I hate that, so that feels bad to me. Weapon swapping just kind of seems clunky with having to have two dedicated skill trees, and also the two-toned weapon styles. I don't know, because I've never played it, because no one's ever played it to the extent, but like, if I'm building a passive tree for fire damage, and I'm supposed to be building a second passive tree for lightning damage, they're saying these situations where one is going to be use case better than the other, i.e. there's no reason not to support something else to shock, then swap. But all that level of like having to react to things while also trying to blow through a map feels bad, which I think is artificial slowdown, and I don't really like that concept, but again, that's just a feel thing. The sockets are now just Abyss sockets, which are like WoW gems, just levels of min-max, but it ties into the Valor problem we'll get to later. This one really was kind of troublesome. So many classes were showcased looting ground orbs, like globes for mechanics, like I'm killing a thing on the Necro class, and then like it drops thing I have to run around picking it up. This reminds me, it's very, very similar to a lot of other ARPGs have this, and it feels fucking terrible in all of them, which is I'm doing a build that makes when I kill things the chance to drop an orb, and I have to run around picking up like orbs, right? I don't like that. Just always felt terrible in every game. It reminds me of like the goal producing small shrines. I don't want to be running around clicking small shrines or having to hunt little nuggets on the ground to have my class function. So that just always felt bad. I'm curious if it feels bad in this one. The new lab thing is we could kind of backpedal this because now we know that you don't have to do the Sanctum, but having forced Sanctum as an option for lab is something I will literally never choose in a million years. I would rather run 100 labs than be forced to an hour-long Sanctum to get my Ascendancy. No fucking chance I'm doing that. Running the Ultimatum over... that's fine, but like, there's no way I'm doing fucking Sanctum, so... eat me raw. Cruel difficulty being added back, just kind of a PoE meme vibe for PoE 1. It was cool 12 years ago when that was a relevant concept, but like, now I don't know why they just didn't crunch the numbers differently than adding, I heard you didn't, I heard half the player base blows through the campaign. Well, how about you do it again? We've already done that 4 times. There used to be 4 difficulties. It felt really bad then. It's probably going to feel bad temporarily, but that's fine. This was a weird one. During the showcase of Essence, they showed one of the Essence rares had a Divine Shrine on it. That's gross. Immunity in PoE is gross. Divine Shrines are gross. Don't like it. So the mapping system, which we mentioned earlier, is basically still existing, just on the Settlers of Catan 3D board. But I think that's a really big missed opportunity to break the map cycle of PoE, which I think is really, really bad feeling. Reasons why they've bit so many things from Last Epoch in this entire thing is because there's a lot of fluidity that game has that this game doesn't. And having it so you're going to go through the same alch cycle for mapping feels bad. So you get your maps, you alch them, they have shit mods, you reroll them, then you run them. Like, all that time prepping you could have just spent going to mapping. It always feels bad. It's like, I don't like having, to spend a half hour of my first 8-hour session of just prepping maps has never felt good. They could have not had that happen again. It seems like it's just going to happen again. When he was describing the juicing, excited for 1% of the population, but a lot of people, that's a massive turnoff. Is like, oh, I want to breach. I now have to spend 20 hours hunting a specific spot on the board, investing very specific amounts of currency in 8 different directions so I could breach to the fullest. Which means until then, every breach feels flaccid. Like, it's just Sextants, it's just Watchstones, it's just all of that stuff. Which is very PoE, but it seemed like a good chance to not have that negative connotation in PoE 2, but it seems like they're latching onto it. The base Atlas passive tree was massively small. So tiny. Very small. If the design portion, as they described, was not to introduce FOMO of choices, and we're picking it all eventually, effectively, what's the point of having a tree? It's like those who played World of Warcraft, this expansion, when you have like your talent tree from 70 to 80, you're grabbing it all eventually. The only thing that matters is just the order in which you pick it for like 4 hours, and then it's fucking irrelevant. Like, if you're gonna grab it all, it doesn't matter, and it really shouldn't, there shouldn't be a choice design there. It's just, if we're gonna basically get it all, then it could just be passive allocation. Like, it doesn't have to be putting points in or like fear of FOMO. You could just remove the choice altogether and just have it be unlocks, but that's whatever. The fragmented Atlas tree means we're gonna end up with, at the moment, 7 Atlas trees across all mechanics. That just seems really a lot for like people to digest. And if it isn't a lot and it's extremely minor, why does it exist? if there's not much choice options there, what's the point of having it? Like, either it has to be a mechanic we delve into, or it's just going to be like, there's 3 branches and we pick 2. Okay, so then why even have it? Just give us all 3. It's like having league mechanics on an Atlas tree. If we're all picking it anyway, what's the fucking point of having it there? I mentioned the gold pickup radius. Terrible. The Breachstone Showcase is a bit of a weird omen, but I think this really falls onto their incredibly poor demo videos they do for existing PoE players, which is, we see that 300 breach fragments equaling a Breachstone. They showcased 3 map packs over 3 different maps for breach, and it dropped 1 to 2 splinters, I believe. So are we gonna spend 8 hours to get 1 Breachstone? Like, it's just a balance concern there. But again, that's their showcase, so who knows? In the socket thing I mentioned, like, based off the way that they're describing sockets, using Val Orbs to over value the different sockets, you could, like, the end game progression for all pieces of gear is valing everything to get more sockets, because you're literally just losing large chunks of stats by not having it, so just everything just gets valed eventually. Could be kind of yikes. Dying to Uber bosses rips the encounter and requires refarming. That's a massive red flag to me. Like, it feels so bad when you've played Ultimatum, for example, for a week. You get 1 Trial Master, you die once, boom, gone. Like, that feels bad alone. But you know what felt even worse was, like, the Shaper Elder progression system, which is you work 30 maps, which could be more than a person even plays in a day. Most people play in a day, right? 30 maps is a lot of time. Get to an Elder, and then my fucking client crashes and I have to do that again. Like, or I die once to something I have no idea what the fuck. Gray on gray on gray mechanic. Like, that feels bad. I wish they adopted the approach that, like, King of the Mist has, or Delve has, which is like, you've spent the effort to get to them, now it's a very small amount of currency to keep refighting them if you seem to fail. They did not adopt that at all. They went the totally opposite direction. So if you die, get fucked. This is going to promote the thing I don't like in the game for many people, which is, why would I run my progression content when I could pay someone in trade to do it for me? I'm not running my Maven. I'm going to pay someone better who has more time to play to run my Maven for me. And I never get to do Maven, because there's no point to do it after my 1 time to get my stone, because it costs too much to run. So it's promoting not engaging with content, which I think is bad. And this is the biggest thing that wasn't answered, which is, are all of these 7+ Atlas trees character bound? If they're not, that's horrendous. Like, people already have a hard time re-rolling characters because you even have time sunk into setting up your Atlas. If you have to set up 7 Atlas trees and set up, those maps are not, if those maps aren't account bound for the entire league, for those people, holy shit, you're never going to get people making alts. Like, that's going to be the most unpromoting alt maker ever. Like, having to go through all of that tree exploration and then some for each character would be wild. So that's what I marked as, like, negative thoughts, but, you know, there's silver linings amongst them. And then the positive thoughts section, I said, it was cool to see damage numbers above boss health bar. They showed boss health bar, and they showed that there was damaging numbers triggering above it. But what that means is there's no excuse to not have a training dummy in town, right? If we hit a boss and it says 12,000 above their head, they could just put a dummy in our hideout, right? So maybe that'll just be sold as a thing, but we should definitely be able to have a training dummy then to test damaging mechanics, etc. The Atlas board seemed very full of content and lots to explore. It was big, it looked pretty, a lot of stuff, that's good. All uniques having art in game, that's good. They're still missing uniques with art in PoE 1, 12 years in, still missing uniques art, so that's a bummer, but good that PoE 2 solved that. Promoting crafting in the campaign is extremely healthy. Anyone who's played Last Epoch knows how good that feels. To be able to, like, find a piece of gear, craft it, make an upgrade mid-map, mid-campaign. That's really, really good that they're adopting that. The spirit minion system, I like how it looks, where it's like you get 200 spirit, and I could choose to allocate that amongst, like, do I want more skeletons, do I want more zombies, do I want more specters, whatever. I like that choice, and I like that they're all auto respawning. Minion builds feel terrible if your minions don't come back unless you manually do them. So, like, think of Golem as an elementalist. Like, that's what you want to feel. That feels great. Fantastic. The gem system seems fluid and promotes messing around. Yes, the only fear is it being weird, like, drop-gated stuff, but it didn't seem the case. It seemed like they're getting plenty of supports. But that's good if you could just, like, try stuff That's always a good feeling. Same with the fluid attribute system, being able to click on a small node and pick if you want in-strength decks. Good. And the final thing I had was just Titan Grip, something that we've been asking for in from World of Warcraft to be added to PoE for the entirety of 12 years that the game has existed. Like, hey, it'd be cool if we could dual wield weapons, And yeah, again, for any of these demonstrations, like you're saying in chat, the demo videos and showcases that they're making is for a kid who just hit 18. He bought his first Omen gaming computer, and he's never left the house like Encino Man, right? This is like a kid who's never played a fucking game before, and you're describing to them what a gem is. That's what these demos are for. They're not for me. They're not for anyone who's played this game remotely. That's the reason I have all these questions, is because they're not answered. If it was for someone like me, these questions would be answered. These questions will be answered within 3 days of playing the game. Every one of them. Every question, comment, concern I have will be resolved in 3 days, for better or for worse, because we'll know. It will be an endgame in a day or two, no problem. They say 25 hours to get to the maps for 40 hours. It'll take us 2 days, because myself and people like me will be, probably streaming 20 hours a day for the first weekend. I know I will be. Like, it's launching on Friday. I have my podcast on Monday. I'll probably clock 60 hours in 3 days. That's what I'm going to be doing. So it's like, I'll be able to answer all these questions by then. But those are my comments and thoughts and stuff going into it. Am I excited? No. Am I ever excited? No. Because again, I want to see what it feels like. So until I see what it feels like, just gotta wait and see. That's it. It should be good. It looks good. It sounds good. Hopefully it runs good. It's a Grinding Gear Games launch weekend, December 6th, which means it's probably gonna be a technical disaster. Even their live stream went down. It's, I wouldn't expect anything less. It's on brand as you can get. For better or for worse, they seem to have a litany of technical issues. I don't know why it keeps happening, but here we are. But yeah, I look forward to playing the game and trying out things. I'll play at least every class once. In every single reset, there'll be live streams, there'll be videos, there'll be, build guides if you could see it. Not that we have any information to go on, but we'll figure it all out together. That's about it. I'm going to stop recording now.